The morning I realized my life had quietly fallen apart didn't feel dramatic. There was no storm, no shouting, no cinematic moment. Just silence and pain. At least true to her. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The air felt thick, heavy with things we had both been avoiding for weeks, maybe longer. Finally, she grabbed her phone from the dresser. "The nurse will be here later," she said. "Just wait for her next time, okay? Don't try to handle things on your own. Handle things on my own." I almost laughed. "I used to handle everything on my own," I said softly. She didn't hear me, or pretended not to. "I'll be downstairs," she added, already halfway out the door. Then she was gone. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. I sat there, the pill still in my hand, staring at nothing. My chest felt tight, but I didn't cry right away. I just sat, because crying would make it real. Eventually, the tears came anyway. Slow, quiet, controlled. I had always been good at quiet. That morning stretched on longer than it should have. I took my medication, forced myself to stand again, and shuffled to the bathroom with careful, measured steps. Every movement reminded me of what she had said. "You are a burden." It echoed in my head, over and over, until it no longer sounded like her voice. It sounded like truth. Back in the room, I looked around at the space that was supposed to be mine. A few of my things. Some clothes. A framed photo I hadn't had the courage to unpack completely. This wasn't my home. It never had been. I had convinced myself that moving in with Lena would bring us closer. That we'd spend time together. Talk. Laugh. Instead, we had learned how to avoid each other. How to coexist without connection. I picked up the photo from the dresser. It was old, years old. Lena was younger, smiling, her arm wrapped around me. We looked happy. We were happy. What happened to us? I whispered. No answer came. Only the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not dramatically, not loudly, but permanently. I realized something simple. I couldn't stay here. Not like this. Not where my presence felt like a problem waiting to happen. I had spent my entire life taking care of others, fixing things, making space. Now I needed to make space for myself, even if it meant leaving the only place I had left. I set the photo back down carefully, wiped my face, and for the first time in weeks, I started thinking about leaving. I didn't leave that day. If I tell this story honestly, I have to admit that I stayed and I pretended. For 2 more days, I moved through the house like a ghost, careful not to make noise, careful not to need anything, careful not to exist too loudly in a space that no longer felt like mine. Lena avoided me just as skillfully. We spoke only when necessary, and even then, our conversations were stripped down to the bare minimum, short, practical, emotionless. It was as if we had both silently agreed not to address what had been said that morning. But silence doesn't erase truth. It sharpens it. By the 3rd night, I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears until your thoughts become too loud to ignore. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying her words again and again. "You are a burden." At first they had hurt. Then they had settled. And now they were guiding me. Around 2 a.m., I sat up slowly, wincing as the familiar pain pulled through my body. I reached for the lamp and turned it on, bathing the room in a soft yellow glow. The walls looked different at night, less like a temporary space and more like a waiting room. That's what this had been. A waiting room for a life that wasn't coming back. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and just sat there for a moment, breathing, thinking. Then, without overanalyzing it, without giving myself time to doubt, I reached for my phone. My hands hesitated slightly before unlocking it. I didn't know exactly who I was going to call until I remembered a conversation from months ago. A woman I had met briefly at a rehabilitation center after my surgery. Her name was Carol. We had spoken only once, but she had mentioned a place, a small residential home, somewhere quieter, more personal than a hospital or a typical facility. At least there, she had said, you feel like a person, not a problem. At the time, I had smiled politely and dismissed the idea. Now it felt like the only idea I had. I searched my contacts. I had saved her number, though I never thought I'd use it. My finger hovered over the call button. This is ridiculous, I muttered to myself. But I pressed it anyway. It rang twice, 3 times. Then, hello. Her voice was soft, slightly groggy. Carol, this is Abigail. We met a few months ago. At the clinic. There was a pause, then recognition. Oh, Abigail. Yes, I remember. Are you all right? I didn't know how to answer that. Yes, I said finally.
No.
I'm not sure. That made her fully awake. What's going on? I swallowed, suddenly aware of how strange this must sound, calling someone I barely knew in the middle of the night. I need to ask you something, I said. That place you mentioned, the residential home, is it still available? There was a longer pause this time, but not an uncomfortable one. A thoughtful one. It might be, she said.
Why?
Are you thinking about moving? I closed my eyes. I think I already decided, I whispered. She didn't ask more questions than necessary. That was something I appreciated immediately. I can give you the number, she said. Or, I can call ahead for you in the morning if you'd prefer. I exhaled slowly, feeling something shift inside me. Not relief exactly, but direction. The number's fine, I said. I'll call. She gave it to me, repeating it twice to make sure I had it right. Abigail, she added gently before we hung up, whatever you're going through, you're allowed to choose better for yourself.
Allowed.
It was a strange word, but it stayed with me after the call ended. I didn't go back to sleep. Instead, I sat there until morning, watching the light slowly creep into the room, turning shadows into shapes, shapes into reality. By 7 a.m., I had made up my mind completely. Lena had already left for work. I heard the front door close, her footsteps quick and distracted, just like every morning.
She didn't check on me. She didn't say goodbye.
And for the first time, I didn't wait for her to. Once the house was silent again, I picked up my phone and dialed the number Carol had given me. A calm, professional voice answered. Good morning, Maple Grove residents. How can I help you? Maple Grove. Even the name sounded softer than where I was. My name is Abigail, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I was wondering if you have any available rooms. There was a brief pause as the woman checked. We do have one opening, she said. May I ask when you're looking to move in? I looked around the room, at the walls, at the suitcase tucked in the corner that I hadn't unpacked fully since I arrived. As soon as possible, I replied. Would you like to come see the room first? I thought about it, then shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. No, I said. I trust that if it's livable, that's enough. She didn't laugh. She didn't question it. All right, she said kindly. We can prepare the paperwork today. Would you need assistance with transportation? Yes, I admitted. That would help. Then we'll arrange it. Can you be ready by tomorrow morning? Tomorrow. The word felt heavy and freeing at the same time. Yes, I said. I can. After the call ended, I sat very still. It was done. Not emotionally, not completely, but practically, which meant there was no turning back. The rest of the day passed in a quiet blur. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I packed slowly, deliberately, choosing only what truly mattered.
Clothes.
A few books. Personal items. A small wooden box filled with things I couldn't replace. Old letters, a bracelet, a photograph I finally allowed myself to unwrap completely. I didn't take much, because I realized something important. I wasn't leaving a home. I was leaving a place where I had been tolerated, and there's nothing to hold on to in that. By evening, everything was ready. 2 bags. That was all my life had been reduced to. I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at them, feeling a strange mix of sadness and clarity. Then I reached for a notebook. If I was leaving, I needed to say something. Not everything, just enough. I began to write, not with anger, not with accusation, just truth. When I finished, I read it once, folded it carefully, and placed it on the bed where she would see it. I didn't mention her words. I didn't need to. Some things don't need repeating to be understood. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Not because I was comfortable, but because I had made a choice. And in the morning, I would leave. The morning I left didn't feel real. It should have. It should have felt heavy, dramatic, final. But instead, it felt strangely quiet, like the moment before something begins rather than something ending. I woke up before dawn, not because I had to, but because my body refused to sleep any longer. There was a stillness in the room, the kind that makes every small sound louder. The ticking of the clock, the faint hum of electricity in the walls, my own breathing. For a few seconds, I forgot. Then I saw the bags. And I remembered. I was leaving today. I sat up slowly, bracing myself against the familiar ache in my body. The pain was still there, sharp, persistent, but it felt different this morning. Less like something holding me back, more like something I was carrying with me. A reminder, not a barrier. I reached for my robe and slipped it on, then stood carefully, testing my balance. One step, then another. The floor was cold beneath my feet, grounding. All right, I whispered to myself. Let's do this. I moved through the room slowly, taking one last look at everything. The bed I had slept in but never felt comfortable in. The dresser where my things never quite belonged. The window that looked out onto a backyard I had never really stepped into. Nothing in this room held me. That realization was both painful and freeing. My letter was still on the bed, exactly where I had left it. Lena's name written clearly on the front. I picked it up for a moment, running my fingers over the paper. I wondered how she would react. Would she be angry? Relieved? Indifferent? Would she read it immediately or leave it sitting there for hours, maybe days? A part of me wanted to stay just long enough to see her reaction. But I knew better. Some answers aren't meant to be witnessed. I placed the letter back down carefully. Then I picked up my bags. The house was silent as I stepped into the hallway. No movement.
No voices.
No signs of life. For a brief second, I considered walking to her door, knocking, saying something, anything, to close the distance between us, even just a little. But I stopped myself, because I knew what would happen. We would talk in circles. She would justify. I would minimize. And in the end, nothing would really change.
No.
Leaving quietly was the only way to leave honestly. I made my way to the front door, each step slow but steady. My hand rested on the handle for a moment longer than necessary. This was it. I wasn't just leaving a house. I was leaving the version of my life where I stayed, where I wasn't wanted. I opened the door. Cool morning air greeted me, crisp and clean. It felt different out here, lighter somehow, as if the world didn't know what had happened inside those walls. The car arrived right on time. A simple vehicle, nothing special, but the driver stepped out immediately when he saw me, offering a polite smile. "Miss Abigail?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "I'm here from Maple Grove. Let me help you with your bags." His tone was respectful, not rushed, Not irritated, just kind. I hadn't realized how much I missed that. He took my bags gently, placing them in the trunk, then returned to help me into the car. His movements were careful, patient, as if I wasn't an inconvenience to be managed, but a person to be assisted. It almost caught me off guard. "Thank you," I said quietly. "Of course," he replied. "Take your time." Once I was seated, I looked straight ahead. I didn't turn back. Not when the car door closed. Not when the engine started. Not even when we began to pull away. Because I knew if I looked, I might hesitate. And I couldn't afford hesitation now. The drive was quiet at first. The city passed by in a blur of familiar streets and unfamiliar feelings. Places I had seen 100 times suddenly looked different, as if I were seeing them from a distance I hadn't realized existed. We stopped at a light, and I watched a woman walking her dog, laughing into her phone. Life moving forward, uninterrupted.
It struck me then.
The world doesn't pause for personal endings. It keeps going, and you either go with it or you stay behind. First time at Maple Grove, the driver asked gently, breaking the silence. "Yes," I said. "You'll like it," he nodded. "It's a good place.
Calm.
People are nice." I wanted to believe him. "I hope so," I replied. After that, we fell back into silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It gave me space to think, or maybe to stop thinking, because for the first time in days, I wasn't replaying conversations in my head. I wasn't analyzing every word, every look, every moment. I was just moving forward. When we finally turned onto a quieter road, I noticed the change immediately. Less traffic, more trees, the noise of the city fading into something softer. And then I saw it. Maple Grove. It wasn't what I expected. Not sterile, not cold. A modest building surrounded by greenery, with wide windows and a small garden out front. Nothing extravagant, but peaceful. That was the word. Peaceful. The car came to a stop near the entrance, and before I could even reach for the handle, the door opened. A woman stood there, smiling warmly. "You must be Abigail," she said. "Welcome. Welcome." Another word I hadn't realized I needed. "Yes," I said, stepping out carefully. "I'm Nora," she continued. "I'll help you get settled." Her presence was calm, reassuring. Not overly cheerful, not forced. Just genuine. The driver handed over my bags, and Nora gestured toward the entrance. "Let's take it slow," she said. "No rush." Inside, the space felt human. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs, the faint scent of something clean, but not clinical. A few people sat in the common area, some reading, some talking quietly. No one stared. No one judged. I wasn't the center of attention, and that alone made me feel more at ease. "We'll take care of paperwork later," Nora said. "Right now, let's get you to your room." My room. The words felt unfamiliar. We moved down a short hallway, and she opened a door near the end. "This one," she said. I stepped inside. It was simple. A bed, neatly made, a small dresser, a chair by the window, light filtering in softly through thin curtains. Nothing extraordinary, but it was clean, quiet, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like a space that could belong to me. I walked slowly to the window and looked outside. The garden stretched just beyond, a few flowers in bloom despite the season. "It's not much," I said, almost apologetically. Nora shook her head gently. "It's a beginning," she replied. "A beginning." I let that settle, because she was right. This wasn't the life I had planned, but it was the life I had chosen, and that made all the difference. Later, after my bags were unpacked and I was finally alone, I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands resting in my lap. The silence here was different. Not heavy, not tense, just quiet. I reached for my phone instinctively. It was still off. I turned it over in my hands, thinking, somewhere out there, Lena had probably found the letter by now. Maybe she had called. Maybe she hadn't. I didn't know. And, for the first time, I didn't need to know immediately. I placed the phone on the nightstand without turning it on. That was a choice, too. That evening, as the sun began to set, soft light filled the room, painting the walls in warm tones. I sat by the window, watching it slowly dip below the horizon. There was a strange calm inside me. Not happiness. Not yet. But something close. Something steady. I had left. I had chosen myself. And even though I didn't know what would come next, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of it. The first few days at Maple Grove felt unreal, like I had stepped into someone else's life by accident and no one had noticed yet. There was a routine here, but it wasn't forced. Breakfast was served in a shared dining room, lunch followed a loose schedule, and in between, people moved at their own pace. No one hovered over me, no one rushed me, and most importantly, no one made me feel like I was in the way. That alone was enough to make me uneasy at first. I had grown used to measuring my movements, my needs, even my presence. Here, no one seemed to be measuring anything. On my third morning, I decided to leave my room longer than necessary. Not just for meals, not just for therapy, but to actually exist outside of those walls. I took my time getting ready, choosing a sweater I hadn't worn in weeks. It felt like a small act of defiance, wearing something simply because I wanted to, not because it was easy or practical. With careful steps and the support of my walker, I made my way down the hallway and into the common area. A few people were already there. A man reading a newspaper, a woman knitting, another quietly watching television. No one paid me too much attention, but when I passed, a few offered small smiles. It wasn't overwhelming. It was respectful. I chose a chair near the window and sat down, letting myself observe before engaging. That had always been my way. Watch first, understand, then step in. You're new. The voice came from my left. I turned slightly and saw a woman about my age, leaning on a cane that looked anything but ordinary. It was wrapped in colored threads, small charms hanging from it, catching the light when she moved. Yes, I said. I just arrived a few days ago. She nodded, studying me with a kind of directness that might have been uncomfortable if it weren't paired with curiosity rather than judgment. I'm Margaret, she said, but most people here call me Maggie. Abigail, I replied. Well, Abigail, she said, settling into the chair beside me without asking, you look like someone who didn't expect to end up here. I let out a quiet breath, surprised by how accurate that was. I didn't, I admitted. No one does, she said lightly. But the real question is, did you come here by choice, or because someone decided for you? There it was. The question no one had asked directly yet. I chose to come, I said after a pause. Maggie raised an eyebrow slightly, not in disbelief, but in recognition. Ah, she said. So you're still in that phase. That phase. The one where you protect the people who hurt you, she replied calmly. Don't worry. Most of us started there. I felt a flicker of defensiveness rise in my chest. It wasn't like that, I said, perhaps a little too quickly. I just realized it was better for everyone. For everyone, she repeated, nodding slowly. Yes. That's a familiar sentence. She didn't push further, which somehow made her words linger even more. Instead, she shifted slightly and tapped her cane against the floor. You'll figure things out, she said. Just don't rush yourself into pretending everything is fine before it actually is. I looked at her, unsure whether to feel comforted or exposed. Is it that obvious? I asked quietly. She smiled, not unkindly. Only to those of us who've lived it. That conversation stayed with me longer than I expected. Not because it upset me, but because it made me question something I hadn't allowed myself to question yet. Had I really left only for practical reasons? Or had I left because staying meant losing something I couldn't afford to lose? Myself. Later that afternoon, I attended my first group activity, a simple art session in a bright room filled with soft chatter and scattered supplies. I almost didn't go. The idea of sitting with strangers, trying to create something, felt unnecessary. But something in me pushed forward anyway. Maybe curiosity, maybe loneliness, or maybe the beginning of something new. The instructor, a young woman named Claire, greeted me warmly and guided me to an empty seat. "No pressure," she said. "Just try." That phrase again. No pressure. I picked up a brush, hesitating for a moment before dipping it into the paint. The first stroke felt awkward, uncertain, but then another followed, and another, until I wasn't thinking about how I looked or whether I was doing it right. I was just painting. Time passed without me noticing. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I wasn't replaying memories or anticipating conversations that hadn't happened yet. I was present. When the session ended, I looked down at what I had created. It wasn't perfect, not even close, but it was something. And more importantly, it was mine. "Not bad for a first time." Maggie's voice appeared behind me. I turned, slightly embarrassed. "It's just random," I said. "There's no such thing as random," she replied. "Only things you haven't understood yet." I wasn't sure what she meant, but I didn't argue. That evening, back in my room, I sat by the window again, the painting resting against the wall beside me. The silence didn't feel as empty anymore. It felt open, like space instead of absence. I reached for my phone. This time, I turned it on. It buzzed immediately. Notifications, messages, missed calls, all from Lena. My heart tightened. For a moment, I considered turning it off again, but I didn't. Instead, I opened the messages. The first ones were frantic. "Where are you? Why aren't you answering? Abigail, please call me." Then came anger. "You can't just leave like this. This is not okay." And then, silence. The last message was from 2 days ago. "I found your letter." Nothing after that. I stared at the screen for a long time, waiting for something else to appear. It didn't. A strange feeling settled in my chest. Not relief, not disappointment, because I found your letter. That caught my attention. "The one you left when you moved out," he clarified. "Lena kept it."
I didn't know what to feel about that.
She had kept it but never responded. "And?" I asked. "And it didn't match what she told me," he said carefully. I leaned back slightly, studying him. "What did she tell you?" He hesitated, choosing his words. "She said that moving you here was something you both agreed on, that it was the best option for your recovery, that you wanted professional care." I couldn't help it, I laughed. Not loudly, not bitterly, just honestly. "That sounds much nicer than the truth," I said. "I thought so," he replied quietly. We sat down on the bench, the space between us filled with something unspoken but understood. "Would you be willing to tell me what actually happened?" he asked. There was no judgment in his voice.
No accusation.
Just a request. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to protect Lena. So I told him. Not everything, but enough. I told him about the fall, about the distance that had been growing long before that, about the words she said, about the moment I realized I wasn't staying because I was loved, I was staying because I was tolerated, and how I couldn't live like that anymore. Daniel listened without interrupting. His expression changed slowly as I spoke, concern, then confusion, then something closer to disappointment. When I finished, he sat quietly for a long moment. "That's not what I expected," he admitted. No, I said. It usually isn't. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly trying to process everything. I knew something was off, he said finally. The way she avoided talking about you. The way she dismissed questions. It didn't feel like someone who had made a mutual decision. It felt like someone hiding something. She was, I said simply. He nodded. I think she still is. That didn't surprise me. Why come here, though? I asked. Why not just talk to her? I did, he said. Or at least I tried. And it didn't go well. I could imagine. She was angry that I found the letter, he continued. Angry that I came here. But more than that, she was defensive. Like she knew something was wrong, but didn't want to face it. That sounded exactly like Lena. She's not a bad person, I said quietly, almost instinctively. I don't think she is either, Daniel replied. But I do think she's been avoiding the truth. About you. About herself. We sat in silence again. The wind moved gently through the trees, the world continuing around us, as if this conversation meant nothing. But to me, it meant everything. Why does this matter to you? I asked him after a moment. He looked at me, genuinely surprised by the question. Because she's my wife, he said. And because the person she's trying to be doesn't match the choices she's made. There was something sincere in that. Something steady. I lost my mother a few years ago, he added. If I had the chance to have her back, even if it meant difficulty, responsibility, change, I wouldn't hesitate. That hit deeper than I expected. You sound like a good son, I said softly. I try to be, he replied. Then he leaned forward slightly. I think Lena needs to come here, he said. To see you. To face this. I felt my chest tighten. I don't want to force her into something she doesn't mean, I said. It's not about forcing, he replied. It's about giving her the chance to stop pretending. I looked down at my hands. Part of me wanted that. Part of me was afraid of it. What if nothing changes? I asked. Then at least you'll know, he said. And you won't be waiting for something that isn't coming. That was true. He stood up slowly. I'm going to talk to her again, he said. And this time, I won't let it stay unresolved. I nodded. All right. He hesitated for a moment. Would you be willing to see her if she comes? I took a breath, then answered honestly. Yes. Because despite everything, she was still my daughter. After he left, I remained on that bench for a long time. The sunlight shifted. The air cooled slightly. But I didn't move, because something had changed again. Not my situation, not my past, but the possibility of what could come next. That evening, as I sat in my room, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. For a moment, I just stared at it. Then I opened the message. I spoke to Lena. It wasn't easy, but we're not done yet. Don't lose hope. Daniel. I placed the phone down slowly. Hope. It was a dangerous thing, but for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to feel it, just a little. A week passed after Daniel's message. 7 days of waiting without knowing what I was waiting for. I didn't ask anyone at the front desk if there were visitors. I didn't check my phone every 5 minutes like I might have before. I continued my routine, morning walks, quiet meals, occasional conversations with Maggie, and longer hours spent painting by the window. But beneath that calm, something was building. Not anxiety exactly. More like readiness. I didn't know what Lena would say if she came. I didn't know if she would come at all. But I knew one thing for certain. If she did, I wouldn't be the same woman she left behind. That realization steadied me more than anything else. It was late afternoon when everything finally shifted. I was in my room, adding the final touches to a painting I had been working on for days. It wasn't complicated, just two figures standing apart, with a faint line of light connecting them. I didn't plan it that way at first, but somewhere along the process, it had become obvious what I was painting.
Us.
Not as we were, but as we had become. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts.
Soft.
Careful. Abigail? Nora's voice came from the other side. You have visitors. Visitors. Plural. My hand stilled. For a brief moment, everything inside me went quiet. Thank you, I said, setting the brush down carefully. I'll be there. I stood slowly, adjusting my sweater, smoothing my hair without really thinking about it. Then I picked up the painting, hesitated, and decided to take it with me. Not as a gift. Not yet. Just in case. The hallway felt longer than usual as I made my way toward the main lounge. Each step was steady, but deliberate. I could hear voices before I reached the doorway. One of them unmistakably hers. You shouldn't have come here without telling me. Lena's voice was tight, controlled, but strained underneath. I did tell you, Daniel replied calmly. You just didn't want to hear it. I needed more time. You've had time. I stopped just before entering. For a moment, I considered turning around, but I didn't. Instead, I stepped forward. Daniel saw me first. Relief crossed his face immediately. Abigail, he said. Lena turned. And just like that, there she was. My daughter. For a second, everything else disappeared. The room, the voices, the distance between us. It all faded into something smaller than the moment itself. She looked different. Not physically, not drastically. But there was something in her posture, in her eyes. Less certainty. More awareness. Mom, she said. The word felt unfamiliar coming from her again. Lena, I replied. We stood there for a moment, neither of us moving closer. Then Daniel quietly stepped aside, giving us space without making it obvious. I wasn't sure you'd come, I said. She exhaled, glancing briefly at him before looking back at me. I wasn't sure either, she admitted. Honest. That was new. We sat down across from each other, the distance between the chairs noticeable, but not unbridgeable. I read your letter, she said. I assumed you did. I didn't answer. I noticed. She looked down at her hands. I didn't know how. That made sense. I didn't expect you to, I said. She looked up at me, surprised. You didn't? No, I said calmly, because answering it would have meant facing what was in it. Silence stretched between us. Not uncomfortable, just real. Daniel remained nearby, but quiet. I didn't tell you about the wedding, she said after a moment. I know. I should have. Yes. Another pause. I was ashamed, she added. That word caught my attention more than anything else she had said so far. Of me? I asked. She shook her head quickly. No. Of myself. I waited. I didn't know how to explain you, she continued. Not because of who you are, but because of who I was becoming. I frowned slightly. What do you mean? She took a breath. I was building this version of my life, where everything looked controlled, successful, put together. And you, she hesitated, choosing her words carefully, you didn't fit into that image anymore. The honesty was sharp, but it wasn't cruel. It was raw. I became inconvenient, I said quietly. Yes, she admitted, then quickly added, but not because of you, because of me. I let that sit. After your surgery, she continued, everything changed. You needed help, real help, and I thought I could handle it, but I couldn't, not the way you needed. You could have told me that, I said. I know, she said, her voice tightening. But instead I got frustrated, then resentful, then distant. And when you fell that morning, she stopped. That was when it broke. I finished for her. She nodded. I said things I didn't fully understand at the time, she said. But they were still true in the worst way. I didn't interrupt. I felt overwhelmed, she said. Trapped, even. And instead of dealing with that honestly, I pushed it onto you. That's usually how it works, I said softly. She looked at me carefully. You don't seem angry, she said. I was, I replied. But anger doesn't last as long as clarity. That made her pause. And now, she asked. Now I understand something I didn't before, I said. You didn't stop loving me. You just didn't know how to handle the version of me that needed you. Her eyes filled slightly. That doesn't make it okay, she said. No, I agreed. But it makes it human. Daniel shifted slightly but still didn't speak. I told him it was mutual, she admitted, gesturing toward him. That you chose this. I did choose it, I said. She looked confused. But not the way I said it.
No, y clarifía.
I chose to leave. That part is true. But I chose it because staying meant losing myself. That landed. I didn't want to be someone you tolerated, I added. I wanted to be somewhere I was respected. She swallowed. I didn't realize it had gotten that bad, she said. That's because you weren't looking, I replied gently. Silence again. But this time, something had shifted. We weren't circling around the truth anymore. We were standing in it. I'm sorry, she said finally. Not rushed.
Not forced.
I know, I replied. And I mean it, she added quickly. Not just for what I said, but for everything. For how I handled it.
For not telling you about my life.
For pretending things were different than they were. I studied her. This wasn't the apology I had imagined. It was better. Because it wasn't trying to fix everything. It was just honest. I accept that, I said. She let out a breath, like she had been holding it for weeks. But that's not the most important part, I continued. She looked at me, uncertain. What is? She asked. What happens next? I said. She blinked. I don't want us to go back to how things were, I added. Not before I moved in with you. Not during. Not after. I don't either, she said quickly. Good, I nodded. Because that version of us didn't work. She leaned forward slightly. Then what do we do? I looked down at the painting still resting beside me. Then I handed it to her. She took it carefully, studying it. 2 figures, facing away from each other, connected by a thin line of light. It's us, she said softly. Yes. Still connected, she added. But not the same, I said. She traced the line with her finger. Can we change it? She asked. Not the past, I replied. But what comes after it? Yes. She nodded slowly. I want to try, she said. That's enough for now, I answered. Daniel finally spoke, his voice quiet but steady. That sounds like a beginning. We both looked at him. He was right. Not an ending. Not a resolution. A beginning. After they left, I returned to my room. The space felt different now, not because anything had changed physically, but because something inside me had settled. I sat by the window as the sun began to set, the sky shifting through soft colors. For a moment, I thought about everything that had happened. The fall, the words, the silence, the leaving, and now this. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't complete. But it was real. And that mattered more than anything else. I leaned back slightly, letting the quiet settle around me. I wasn't just someone's mother anymore. Not just someone who had lost something. I was someone who had chosen something. Myself. And somehow, in doing that, I hadn't lost my daughter completely. I had just found a different way to have her in my life. Not as a responsibility. Not as a burden. But as a choice. And this time, we would both have to choose it. Every day.